Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. As the presidential race intensifies, barely a day goes by without Democrats and Republicans promising that if elected, their candidate will fix the, quote, broken immigration system. The system has not worked well for some time. The evidence? Hundreds of thousands of refugees who last year were stuck at the southern border, trying to gain entry and hopefully asylum. Undocumented children whose parents brought them here years ago and are now trapped in legal limbo, unable to get work papers or apply for legal residency. Governors defying federal mandates to accept asylum seekers, and one president after another reversing the previous administration's immigration policies. How did we get here? Is immigration an important issue for voters? What would real immigration reform look like? And do Republicans and Democrats really want it? Here to answer these questions is Anna Law, Associate Professor of Political Science and holder of the Herbert Kurz Chair in Constitutional Rights at Brooklyn College, and an expert on immigration policy history and politics. Welcome.
Thank you, Sheryl, for having me on the show.
Glad you can be here. With so many politicians, with the presidential candidates, talking about immigration, do you think the voters, the people who are going to vote in the November election, do they really care about immigration? Is that a big issue for them?
It depends on whether you're talking about a Democratic or a Republican voter. It depends on where the person gets their news from. Nationwide surveys show that immigration is not one of the top issues. People are worried about economic issues. Abortion and reproductive rights is pretty big.
Inflation.
But, right, the ability to purchase a first home or groceries. But if you're in the ecosystem where you watch conservative media, then you probably really care about immigration.
They keep saying that the immigration system is broken. Is it broken?
Well, there is great polarization in the U.S. politics right now, with the Democrats and Republicans agreeing on almost nothing, but they do agree on one thing. Everyone across the political spectrum agrees the immigration system is broken and not working. So we do have agreement on that. Where we break down is how to fix it.
So how is it not working?
It is not working because there are scenes of thousands of people trying to enter through the southwestern border. There is on a daily basis, there are a couple million, we don't even know how many, undocumented people that live in the United States.
I've heard 11 million to 18 million.
It's probably, between 11 and 15 million, but that's basically conceding we have no idea. So those are two of the biggest issues that showing that the immigration system doesn't work, and it's not working.
So I guess, how did it get broken?
Immigration is one of these issues where it's very hard to get agreement. And there was a time where we could get agreement, but one of the main issues of why it becomes more broken over time is that this nation hasn't seen comprehensive immigration reform in terms of a big overhaul to the system since 1986. And because Congress and the president can't manage to pass an overhaul and realignment of the system to meet American economic needs and political needs and family reunification needs, then there's only all these stopgap measures where you're trying to put out one fire and then you create unintended consequences and you do something else. So that's why it's such a mess, because we haven't had a comprehensive immigration reform in decades.
So let's go to some of the basics. How many people does the United States allow to enter legally each year? I had heard one number, 675,000, but I don't know if that's just a basic number. How do you get into the United States legally?
you know, for people who say, why can't they come legally? It is, so to get in legally, it's because it's very difficult to get in legally. The main way that most people get to the United States legally for long-term residence is to come because a close family member sponsored them. Secondarily, people can also come if a U.S. employer needs skills that they have that they can't find in the United States. So family reunification and employment visas are two routes to a green card. There is a third route through asylum and refugee status. And the asylum and refugee status, that is based on, it's flexible, it's a flexible cap. The family reunification is also a pierceable cap, because we give priorities to different types of relatives. So the spouse of a U.S. citizen would immediately get priority over the brother and sister, or the brother or sister. So it's like, you know, depending on which family member you are, it's sort of like you're standing at the supermarket checkout and there's different lines and each line is moving at a different speed.
Right.
And that's for a green card, that's for permanent residence.
There are also temporary visas. I mean, aren't there for agricultural workers? Mm-hmm. So you can come here and you can harvest the crops and then you have to go back to your own country. But there is no overall cap, or is there an overall cap?
On the temporary work visas, there are caps for each. I mean, there's temporary visas from A through Z. And the biggest categories, you mentioned agricultural workers, H2A, that's a big one, but the biggest category of temporary people who come to the US, think of a temporary visa as milk. It has an expiration date. Tourists, we're in New York City. Where would the US economy be? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry of foreign tourists coming into the United States where they have a visa, and it's usually for 3 months, and then you have to leave. So tourists and foreign students are two very big ones.
Okay.
But agricultural workers and also H-1Bs are high-tech workers that are temporary. And for instance, okay, so you're Toyota, and you have some mid-level engineers and managers that you need to bring from Japan temporarily to work on a project at a US plant. That would be a temporary visa. But each of those has a cap, I believe. But yes, it's, and they run out. And so various industries always complain that we don't have enough workers with these temporary visas.
If one is applying for permanent residency or for asylum, how long does that process take?
Depends where you are applying. Okay, so permanent residency first for a green card. It depends on where you are applying from. So under the legal immigration system, each country has a 25,000 cap. So if you are applying from Monaco because your family petitioned for you, you go straight right in. But China, India, the Philippines, how many people are trying to come from there? There are lines as long as more than 10 years where people have an approved, visa, but the family petition has been approved, but it's not their turn yet, so they're waiting in line. And so families are separated, and sometimes people come and overstay a visa because they're tired of waiting.
It seems to me the system for processing applications for legal residency and the system for policing those who don't meet residency requirements are just understaffed. You know, you have these huge lines at the border, you have these huge waiting periods because you don't have enough immigration judges or whoever it is that processes asylum applications. Mm-hmm. You just don't have enough. So the system's just overwhelmed. So you have this huge backup. And in the meantime, people just undocumented people ease into society and stay there for years. And then when you talk about catching up with them, then it becomes a humanitarian issue.
Right.
Is that seems to me one of the huge problems.
You're right that one of the huge problems is understaffing on the benefits side of providing citizenship and also on the enforcement side. But again, it comes back to the quotas that we have in place don't match up with American workplace needs, right? Because high-tech employers and agricultural employers are always complaining it's such a hassle to get an H-1B or an agricultural worker on a visa, and you guys run out of visas, and what am I supposed to do? So, that's why I end up hiring undocumented people. But so there's a mismatch between the number of visas we give out and what the American economy and what American families, the United States needs to rethink our priorities.
So we need to hire more people, more judges, more people to process the application, and we need to create more visas.
We need to create more visas.
And who does that? Is that Congress?
Congress has to, yes.
So why haven't they done it?
Because for the Republican Party, this is for there not to be reform. They are benefiting from it because they point to the quote unquote chaotic southwestern border and say, you see, Biden is a failure. He can't solve the immigration problem. But Biden put forth a really draconian bill a few months ago, and the Republicans vetoed it. They voted it down. I mean, that bill was so awful that Biden caught a lot of flack from the progressive and liberal end of his party.
What was the bill?
I mean, it was beefing up Border Patrol numbers. It was streamlining the asylum process to make it harder for people to apply for protection. And Biden, said, hey, Republicans, I thought you would love this thing. Why are you voting it down? And they voted it down because Trump was calling members of Congress saying, don't vote for Biden's bill. We can't give him the win.
Do you think either side, either the Republicans or the Democrat, really wants immigration reform, or do they it's just too convenient to use to beat the other side over the head with?
I think the Democrats genuinely want reform because they're the ones being clubbed over the head. Mm-hmm. They're not having much success fighting back. In fact, the entire debate since Trump has the Republicans have put the Democrats on the defensive, in that the Republicans, for Trump and the Republicans, immigration policy is defined as only restrictionist. Only restrictionist. And Democrats are on their heels instead of fighting back and saying, no, a well-regulated immigration system lets people in who have to come in. What are we going to do? Tank a multi-billion-dollar tourism industry? And then now all these foreign students are going to Canada and Europe instead of the United States. This was a source of American pride and soft power. So, I mean, the Democrats have to get less defensive and have to put forward a really affirmative defense of immigration.
The Republican platform, on immigration, as far as we know, I think Trump has said, we basically want to seal the borders and carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history, starting with violent criminals. Well, what's wrong with securing the borders? And what's wrong with deporting undocumented immigrants who are criminals?
As an idea, there's nothing wrong with it. And in fact, Kamala Harris just put out a statement from her campaign echoing those same 2 points, saying, yes, we need to get rid of violent criminals and drug dealers and gang members, and they're trying to secure the border. But securing the border at what cost? The people coming to the United States along the southwestern border, they're not trying to sneak into the country to work illegally. They are asylum seekers from Central America and from Mexico, and they're coming to the border looking for Border Patrol agents to turn themselves in to claim asylum protection. So sealing the border or building a wall is a non-serious, brute response to a very complex problem of why are people coming here and leaving. It's not addressing why they leave. So if you put up a wall to desperate people, they're still going to come. It's not addressing the causes, the push causes. What is pushing people to come here and to leave their homes?
So what can we do? What can the United States do to address those causes? Is there anything we can do?
We can send international aid to these countries. We can have bilateral consultations, which we already do, their law enforcement and US law enforcement about how to get drug cartels and gangs under control that are wreaking havoc in other countries and causing people to flee. We've got to crack down on guns in the United States. And why is that? Because a lot of the crimes being committed by the cartels in Mexico and in Central America, guess where the guns came from? From us. So if you don't want people coming, undocumented, crack down on guns because our illegal guns are flowing over there. I mean, so there are things to be done.
Huge undertaking. Huge
undertakings. I mean, these fixes are going to take years. And people want an overnight fix where this is not, like open sesame, you pull up the drawbridge and people don't come. I mean, they're still going to come.
Now, there are some immigrants that are held in detention. I don't know how many, I mean, you may know. What immigrants are held in detention and why?
People who are held in detention are usually waiting. They've either, some of them have claimed asylum. Others they have been in the United States, found to be undocumented, and they're in deportation proceedings, and they're waiting for a court date.
Okay.
And so the fear is that if you don't incarcerate people, they will flee, and they will disappear into melt into the population. But Obama had a pilot program. If, say, you applied for asylum, you would be assigned a court date and you would be assigned a caseworker who's in charge of you, who would call you and that you had to check in with. Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm still on track for my September 7th court date. And in that pilot program, he had a huge percentage, like 80-something percent, 90% showed up for their court date. So it seems to me, instead of pouring resources into Border Patrol, hire more caseworkers. And incarceration is very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's these private prisons that are making money off of it. It's costing U.S. taxpayers huge amounts of money.
Now, Obama actually, or at least some people say, he actually, under his administration, more people were deported than under, I don't know, a lot of people were deported. Right?
He was known as the deporter in chief by his critics, and here is where I disagree with the Democratic Party. So ever since Bill Clinton, Obama, and everyone after him, including Biden, I don't know about Harris yet, they've tried to triangulate the issue of immigration and try to be as tough or tougher than the Republicans, thinking they're going to win some Republican votes or some independent votes. I mean, that is not working.
Apparently, there was a law passed in 1996 by Bill Clinton that led to more deportations.
Basically, it cut off access to the federal courts for appeals. It made applying for asylum and if you were fighting deportation, it made it much more difficult because it cut off avenues of relief through the institutions.
And does it remain?
Those
difficult?
Remain on the books, and it was a punitive measure. It was widely criticized by liberal opponents of Clinton and of asylum. People who work in asylum said this is a complete disaster. You're going to have people who are fleeing for their lives and who under the law qualify, and they're not going to be able to access that help because you put in all these roadblocks in place.
But are we deporting more people than we used to? Obama deported a lot of people. Have we been deporting more people since Obama, or have the numbers been going down?
We've been deporting as I don't know if it's as high as Obama, but we are deporting people in large numbers. I mean, we have never not deported people. I mean, there's whole chartered planes that are sending people back to Haiti and other countries. So we are still deporting large numbers of people, but the system is not working.
What would real immigration reform look like to you?
Real immigration reform has to take into consideration it cannot be all restrictionist. This country literally, economically, and politically benefits from immigration. Again, my two standard examples of tourism and foreign students, and also cultural and sports exchanges. We're going to tell the Toronto Blue Jays they can't come. We're going to tell Celine Dion take a hike because she's not an American. I mean, so it has to be more balanced where we look at, okay, how do we holistically approach the system so immigration is not thought of as just keeping people out?
So what are some of the things you could do? You'd legalize the DACA people. You'd increase the number of work visas.
Yeah.
What else would you do?
The family reunification system needs an overhaul. The per country quota of 25,000, it's not working. And there has to be a way to balance like the high population countries, people that want to come, and the low population countries, so people are not stuck waiting in line for 10, 12 years. Biden did a couple of things that didn't get covered because it's not outrageous. He extended parole protection to the undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. That's a group of about 550,000 people. If you're undocumented, even if you marry a U.S. citizen, you would have to leave the country and then come back in. And then it gets dicey, and then you may be separated for years, right? So he said, well, people are already here. They're married to a U.S. citizen. I'm going to give them temporary reprieve from deportation. So that's a good move. Something like that in prioritizing, okay, yes, who are we going to protect and who are we going to deport instead of they all have to go.
Do you have any hopes that real immigration reforms, these kinds of things that you mentioned, are going to be enacted anytime soon? Are we going to still be talking about a broken immigration system 10, 15 years from now?
Given how long it's taken to get the last, 1965 was the last overhaul, and then 1986.
Yeah.
It restructured some family categories, but really the big shakeup was the 1965 Act. So before the 1965 Act, we had a racist national origins system. So if you were from Western Europe and Southern Europe, there was no restriction. You could come however many of you. It was informed by eugenics that people from certain countries are smarter, others are more prone to criminal activity. That changed in 1965, which is actually the infrastructure of architecture of the system we have today. In 65, along with civil rights, we decided, okay, this is racist. And we are now going to move to a national origins neutral system where we prioritize family reunification and employer skills for green cards. So we no longer care where you come from. We care if you are related to someone who is a US citizen
Right.
or a green card holder. So that was the last big framework where we reconceptualized the whole thing and aligned it to our national values. We haven't done that. And everything since has been tweaking. And that's when we put in the 25,000 per country limit.
Okay.
Right, with the national origins neutral.
If you had to name one reform that you would like to see, what would it be?
realistically, it would be that I think we could politically do is to give the DACA people permanent protection and not have to have them renew every 5 years. And, you know, they buy 5 years of peace of mind and then they're worried again. I mean, this is a group that, like I said, it's low-hanging fruit. They have wide support among Republicans and Democrats to stay. And the idea that you don't punish children who are brought here for their parents' sins of bringing them here without papers.
But if
So I'd
there's
start with that.
but if there's wide support among Democrats and Republicans, why hasn't it been done?
It's because I think ever since Trump took office, now the Republicans see it as a form of weakness if they don't want to give an inch on immigration, and they think it's a winning issue for them to bludgeon Biden with it. And they may be right, I don't know. I mean, we have an election coming up that's going to be very, very close. I haven't heard Harris's plan, and she seems to tack a little left of Biden on a number of issues. Maybe someone could talk her into doing, something with DACA, or I'm not sure that the Republicans if they lose, they might rethink, using the immigration cudgel to hammer people. But if they win, there's not going to be any reform,
yeah.
and there will be mass deportations. I mean, so.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I want to thank Anna Law, Associate Professor of Political Science and holder of the Herbert Kurz Chair in Constitutional Rights, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at 1-to-1 CUNY TV. Plus, you can now watch on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For the City University of New York and 1-to-1, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.